Welcome to HelloMD Live, and I am so excited to be here today to talk about sex and cannabis, two of my favorite topics, and I am joined here by Chief Medical Officer Dr. Patricia Frye. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure.
So I'd like you to take a moment to talk to the audience about how did you end up here today as an expert talking to me about sexual health and cannabis?
Well, it's interesting that I started my career in cannabis medicine with HelloMD back in 2015.
You were our first doctor.
I was your first doctor, and at that time I didn't know a thing about cannabis. And over the course of a couple of years of evaluating patients and talking to patients and reading, studying cannabis science and medicine at the University of Vermont, I have come to really appreciate the healing effects of this plant.
And if I remember correctly, 5 or 6 years ago, you were really on the fence about the efficacy of cannabis. I mean, we had a little bit of a rocky start there, right?
I did. I was a little conservative, and
rightfully so.
And really didn't understand just how safe this medicine is.
Right. But now you've written a book.
I have. I wrote the Medical Marijuana Guide, Cannabis in Your Health.
And it's an amazing book. And I just have to tell everyone, Dr. Patricia Frye is really one of the nation's, if not the world's, leading experts on cannabis at this point. This book was basically the culmination of all of your experience, not only in your personal practice of seeing thousands of patients, but also on HelloMD's platform.
Absolutely.
So well worth the read if you're interested in medical efficacy of cannabis.
Yes.
And so anything else to say about your experience with cannabis and what led you here today?
Just that cannabis is, I consider it a mini pharmacy within a flower, and it can impact a number of organ systems in the body. We have this endocannabinoid system that's there to regulate and modulate other systems, and it creates balance and homeostasis. And it has an enormously high safety profile. It's a wonderful medicine.
Fantastic. And so I'm just going to emphasize for the rest of this episode, this is the doctor and I'm not the doctor. I'm just me, right? I'm just being Pamela. And she's where the wealth of information and I'm all the anecdotal evidence or whatever my opinion is.
All right.
So let's dive right in.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to start with just some commonly asked questions about sexual health. So one of the most common questions is, how does a positive sex life contribute to your overall health?
Well, sex is another form of expression, and it offers a unique dimension to interpersonal relationships. And the frequency of partnered sex is the mechanism by which we have improved health. So it's about intimacy and connection.
Wait. So you're telling me that the general, your general overall health isn't coming from the act of sex, it's coming from the connection and the intimacy?
That's correct. And well, sex can help reduce stress, and you do burn more calories than you would if you were, let's say, watching television. And there is some vasodilation and increased heart rate, which can improve delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the cells.
Right.
But the basic connection, the human connection, the intimacy, the relationship is what gives people good health.
Right. Well, that's not a great advertisement for Tinder. All right. Okay, so let's go on. We're going to talk about a fun fact. So, I love this one. Okay. So, women have scored big on this one. So, women, apparently, their orgasms last for 20 seconds. And guess how many seconds a male's orgasm lasts?
Pamela, I don't know.
Only 6.
Oh.
Woo! That's score 1. Okay, so do you want another fun fact?
I do.
Okay, because I love the fun facts.
Okay.
Did you know that researchers have found that there is a correlation that if you work more, you're actually having a lot less sex? And the saying goes that you're actually compensating for having less sex by working more. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it could be the opposite. I think it could be that people are working longer hours and not taking the time to relax and to nurture relationships.
So we need to move into a model of radical self-care and have more money and more sex.
Yes, balanced life and work.
Okay, so we're going to continue on with some of our questions. another commonly asked question is, what causes sex to change as you age?
Well, first of all, people age at different rates, and there are a lot of people who age and still enjoy sex. But for particularly women, as the estrogen levels decrease in the body, it can lead to vaginal dryness and it can cause some painful sex. The decrease in estrogen, too, can decrease the desire or the libido.
And can you boost your estrogen levels and counteract that?
Some patients can, but estrogen is contraindicated for a number of women, so that they need to talk to their doctors about adding estrogen into their regimen, be it pharmaceutical or nutritional. Soy is a source of estrogen.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. So, as we age, there are some sort of Debbie Downers about sexual health and having sexual activity. But can I tell you another fun fact?
Okay.
I really like this fun fact because it sits so well with me, which is Time Magazine actually came out with this interesting article about the cougar sex. I think the magic of cougar sex or something like that. And it basically says that women in middle age have higher sex drives, and it's actually due to evolution. And so they have higher sex drives than women in their teens or women in their 20s and even early 30s. And the idea is that as we age, we want to continue to procreate. And so because it may be a little bit harder, we're having more sex. What do you think about that?
I think that's pretty interesting, and it makes sense. Yeah, I think it does make sense as the eggs are aging and you need to use things up before they go bad. I can see where there may be an evolutionary advantage to being more sexually active in your early 40s.
Right. Well, sounds good to me. Okay, so here is another question, but this one is now about cannabis and sex. So what are some ways that marijuana can contribute to having better sex?
Well, it can contribute to better sex in a number of manners. And a lot of it is dose dependent. So you have to be careful with proper dosing, but it can impact all phases of sex. It can increase libido or desire. It can facilitate arousal, which would be erection in men or lubrication in women. It can increase the intensity of orgasms, and some people or partners who use cannabis with sex actually have multiple orgasms, both men and women.
Interesting. I like the sound of that. And so what about cannabis that is more sedating or more stimulating? Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I think that there are different varieties of cannabis, and patients respond to them all differently. You cannot hang your hat on whether something is a sativa or an indica or a hybrid. You have to kind of try it and see how you respond. Some of the more relaxing varieties can decrease anxiety. They certainly all can decrease pain. And THC is good for mood elevation. And so when you decrease anxiety, decrease pain, increase your mood, that all leads to more enjoyable sex. THC also can block protruding thoughts. It can increase focus and have you more in the moment. There's an SNL skit where one of the characters makes a statement. She's having sex with her husband and she says, "Hurry up, the dryer's buzzing." And so THC kind of helps you forget about the dryer and the laundry.
I don't want to be thinking about the dryer while I'm having sex, right? No dryer. Okay, so another fun fact. THC actually affects our perception of pleasure, and it's thought that it has a similar effect to the bliss molecule that we create in our brain called anandamide.
Yes.
I love talking about anandamide because ananda is actually the Sanskrit word for love, I believe, and anandamide means bliss, and so anything that gives me more bliss, I'm down with that. So you tell me, what's going on?
Anandamide is one of the compounds that the body makes that activates our endocannabinoid system. And it is called the bliss molecule because it will stimulate certain areas of the brain that are involved with sex, with pleasure, with reward, and it is a pain reliever. It elevates mood. It balances out a lot of issues.
Right. So it actually mimics that in a way.
Yes, THC will activate the receptors the same way anandamide will.
Right. I want to be called anandamide. Do you think I can change my name?
You could.
Oh, good. You can call me anandamide from now on.
And another cannabinoid fact is that CBD is thought to be so helpful because it interferes with the enzyme FA that breaks down anandamides. So
Right.
that when we have issues where patients have low levels of anandamide, by using CBD, we can raise their anandamide levels.
So it's like anandamide and FA are like in mortal combat, and we want anandamide
Yes.
to win.
Absolutely. That's a
Right.
good way of putting it.
Right. Don't call me FA, call me anandamide.
There you go.
Okay. So, audience question. Can smoking weed help me with having painful sex?
Yes, because both THC and CBD are pain relieving, they both relax the muscles, and that would include the muscles in the perineum. It would help with pain if you have arthritis in your hips or in your lower back. So using cannabis can definitely reduce pain. I have patients with a condition called vulvodynia, and they have pain in the area around the vagina. We don't know what causes it. There's really no good treatment for it. Those patients commonly come back and report to me that by using cannabis before sex, they're able to have sex and enjoy it and without pain.
And so, just to clarify on that, if it's a lack of lubrication, you still would need lubrication in addition to ingesting cannabis.
If you have lack of lubrication despite using the cannabis, then yes, you could use a topical.
Yeah, Wonder Twins unite. All right, another fun fact. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay, so sex feels good, but it also relieves pain. So I was just thinking about this. If you stub your toe, it sounds like you should immediately go and have sex.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. And there are a couple of studies actually that I've read in the past that show that that sex relieves migraines.
Right. That sounds, there's no argument there.
All
I think
right.
it relieves a lot of things.
It does.
And increases intimacy, according to you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now we are going to just take a moment and look at this book, because I think this is a book that everyone in their life should at some point take a look at. But I was a little bit surprised. It's the Kama Sutra. This one is by Nietzsche Lacroix. The last time I looked at it, it was actually full of illustrations. And I actually can't open this to many pages because it's no longer illustrations. We'll just give you an idea there. So, but the Kama Sutra is a really interesting book. And Sir Richard Burton says, the Kama Sutra, a treatise on men and women, their mutual relationship and connection with one another. And it's an ancient script. And I'm just going to read a little bit from this because it is so interesting, and it dates back thousands and thousands of years. In ancient India, sense and sensuality were seen as two sides of the same coin. To embrace and enjoy sex was considered to be an integral part of the journey of life, to be enjoyed without guilt. Sexuality was at the very heart of all Hindu culture, including poetry, art, and music. Ancient Hindu sages preached the importance of sexual love. Temple walls and religious caves were carved with exquisitely erotic sculptures, and Hindu paintings detailed explicit sexual activities. One Hindu text has famously stood the test of time to become the definitive practical guide to great sex, the Kama Sutra. Are you ready to go on to the next question?
I am ready.
All right. Okay, so next audience question. Can cannabis help with performance anxiety?
Absolutely. Both THC and CBD are anxiety-reducing agents. THC, though, you have to be careful about the dosing. You have to keep the dose low. If you take too much, it will increase your anxiety and even to the point of causing paranoia. So as long as you're careful with your dosing, it will help performance anxiety for sex and for presentations at work and for other issues as well.
Right. I actually used to have a lot of anxiety. I went from being somebody without anxiety to having anxiety and ended up having panic attacks when having to do something like this. And I found that CBD was what actually, I don't have anxiety anymore. I still get worry or concern, but that's certainly not something that we want to be dealing with if we're trying to have a wonderful sexual connection with somebody.
Exactly.
So what is your suggestion to people about finding that right dose?
always start with a low dose and gradually increase it. Everyone responds to cannabis differently. If you take too much, you have to wait for it to be metabolized and to leave your system, which can ruin the evening if you do take too much.
That'll ruin any evening.
That's true. But cannabis is using cannabis is like using alcohol. A little bit can be anxiety reducing. It can decrease inhibitions. It can help you relax. It helps with muscle relaxation. But if you take too much, it can ruin the evening.
Yeah. Great sound advice from the doctor over here. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between cannabis effects on women and men's sexual experience.
Well, with women, as we mentioned, cannabis can decrease anxiety, it can relax the muscles in the perineum, it can alleviate pain in the area, and women don't seem to be as affected by dosing issues as much as men. With men, the cannabis can help with desire or libido, it can increase arousal, it can help with erections, but if they use too much THC can actually, well, they may maintain an erection, which is fine for the woman, but they may have a lot of difficulty climaxing or having an orgasm.
Well, that can just keep going on and on and on.
But did you know that most women really don't like to have sex for on and on and on and on?
Well, that's an interesting fact. Tell us more. I did not know that.
Yes, the studies have found that men think that women like having sex much longer than they really do.
Wow, okay.
Yes.
Well, let's go on to another fun fact. That was a really interesting one. Okay, so fun fact is that men, you can see right here, average 9 erections a day, and 11 erections at night. I do not know what's going on here. How are men getting anything done? That's an average of 20 erections a day. How is this happening, Dr. Frye?
I don't know. I didn't know that. This is news.
I know, it's news to you, and it's news to me. That's why women are so efficient in their lives. Okay. So let's go on to the next question. Okay, so this is an audience question. What would you recommend for post-prostatectomy, urinary incontinence, and erectile dysfunction? That's a big question.
That is a big question. Again, it's back to the trying different varieties of cannabis, trying things with THC. For a man, I would not go over 5 or 10 milligrams of THC to start, and rarely do they need more than that. If they go higher than that, then it may interfere with ejaculation. But it's about finding a variety of cannabis that works for you. There's nothing really specific about those conditions. It's still about starting with low doses and gradually increasing the dose until you feel better.
And with your experience within your practice, is there any method of consumption that is preferred, that you prefer to tell patients about?
I recommend using inhalation for sex.
So like vaping or smoking flower?
Vaping or smoking flower. And I prefer flower to the concentrates because the flower is going to have that full entourage effect of all the terpenes and flavonoids and other cannabinoids that are in the plant.
And just let me stop you right there. So the terpenes are actually, I consider them like the essential oils of the plant, and each flower has different terpenes. So some might have limonene, which is that lemony, beautiful smell. And terpenes exist, fruits, vegetables. Is it vegetables or is it just fruits?
Throughout nature.
Throughout nature. Even insects have terpenes. And so the terpenes actually affect the overall effect that the flower will have on you as well.
Yes, you can have 2 cannabis varieties, the same amount of CBD or the same amount of THC, and they will have different effects because of the terpenes and flavonoids.
Yeah, it's actually a lot more complex than we originally thought.
And I also like inhalation because it gives the couple, the onset of action is predictable. It's going to take about 15 minutes at max. You don't want to wait hours for an edible to kick in. And it's an opportunity during foreplay to share. You know, it can be part of the preparation of getting ready for sex. It's sharing that pipe or joint or however or vaporizer.
You make that sound attractive.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. Do you have any advice for someone who wants to add cannabis into their sex life for the first time?
Again, you try some different varieties before the big day and see how it
The big day.
you.
It's like it's a marathon or something, or like a show.
You don't want to blow it, and you start with small amounts. So if you're using inhalation, you start with 1, at the maximum 2 puffs, and you wait. You
Yeah.
wait 10 to 15 minutes and see how it affects you. If that's enough, you stop there. If you don't feel the effects, you can take another puff. But it's all about gradually increasing the dose until you experience the effects you're looking for.
And in my personal experience, my preference has always been edibles, and choosing edibles that I've used before in a low dose and waiting to feel the effects. But or with vaping and some flour.
The problem with edibles is the absorption is very unpredictable. A lot has to do with how much fat is in the gut. You could eat that whatever edible that is, that dose that you've always taken, and it could kick in an hour, or it could be 4 hours, or it could be the next morning. So you don't want to wait around a long
so
time.
if there's fat in the gut, it actually increases the absorption. So if you eat a bowl of ice cream and then you have, if you have your edible, you're actually going to feel the effects a lot more.
Right, but again, it could take an hour or two before you're going to feel the effects.
I know if for me it takes about an hour and a half, and for some people it doesn't, but I think the rule of thumb is between an hour and 2.
Although I have had patients where it's kicked in the next morning when they were at work.
Oh, that's no good. So always try before you fly, right?
And inhalation, I think, is the best consumption for sex.
So we're going to move on to another fun fact. Okay. Research has shown that sex actually may reduce your overall feeling of stress. What do you think about that?
I think that's true.
But why is that? What is it about cannabis that actually helps people feel like they're reducing their stress? Is there some sort of chemical release in the brain, or is it mimicking something?
Well, CBD in particular interrupts the stress response from the brain. The stress response is a survival mechanism. If you are faced with
A bear.
A bear, exactly. That's my tip. There's a bear in the room. You want to be able to run fast, and so the stress response it goes from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland down to the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and it releases stress hormones that divert blood flow from the gut to the arms and legs to your muscles. It makes you hyper alert. It helps you see, and it helps you to run faster than the other person in the room.
Right, you want to run really, really fast
Yes.
if a bear is running after you.
You don't have to run faster than the bear, just faster than the other person.
So if we were running, I'd be running faster than you.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, we don't know. Let's get a bear and try it out. Okay, so audience question. I'm curious about cannabis and CBD as a lubricant. Can you touch on that subject? That sounds like, no pun intended.
Actually, I've had patients come back and report to me that they're taking CBD for other reasons, and they say, and you know something, Doc, I've been becoming more lubricated, and so it's not the intention that they're using the CBD, but that is a kind of a bonus effect. If that doesn't happen, it's certainly reasonable to use a topical lubricant, and it could contain a cannabinoid like CBD or THC, or it could be something that's just a lubricant.
Well, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, and I know anecdotally from talking to a bunch of my friends and myself that the THC lubricants on the market have actually had a really wonderful overall sensation and effect while having a sexual experience. Now, I know that everybody is different. What are your thoughts on that?
My thought is try it. It might work for you. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, are there any drawbacks to mixing cannabis and sex?
I would say the only drawbacks are one in using too much THC. Of course, for the male, it can interfere with sexual intercourse or with orgasm. For partners who are trying to become pregnant, high THC usage can cause a decrease in the number of sperm. So that that would be a contraindication. And then I don't usually recommend cannabis for couples who are trying to become pregnant, and certainly not in pregnancy, because we just don't have enough data. It's probably okay, but being boarded in pediatrics, anything that involves the developing fetus and young children, young babies, I prefer to err on the side of caution and try to avoid it.
Absolutely. And I want to add something to this about just generally cannabis and sexual health. I like to say, we've been in the cannabis game for a long time, and often people are drawn to cannabis because they have a problem. Maybe it's with their sexuality or sexual health or just sexual experience, whatever it may be. I always like to say that cannabis is sort of a tool in your wellness toolkit. It's not the silver bullet necessarily. Just because you're going to smoke or ingest cannabis doesn't mean that you're going to have an amazing sexual experience. There's so much else that goes into it, like taking good care of yourself and your general wellness, and really trying to create optimal wellness across, like I say, the body, mind, and the spirit.
Absolutely. Cannabis won't fix a bad relationship. If you're having issues, I'm sorry.
It's true.
But let me tell you, there are going to be people say, "Oh, I'm going to use some cannabis and everything's going to be great."
Yeah.
So if you're in a relationship that needs some work, do the work.
Yeah.
See a counselor, see a therapist, do the work.
It's kind of like
but add the cannabis to help with the physical. Yes.
Yeah, it's the icing on top of the cake.
Yes.
It's not the cake itself.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up soon, but we do have 2 more audience questions. Okay, so first audience question. You're advising smoking with all the health drawbacks?
2 or 3 puffs of cannabis once or twice a week is not going to cause a health issue. If you have sensitive airways, like if you have asthma, reactive airway disease, and that's not the best mode of delivery for you, then I would recommend a tincture, an oil that goes under the tongue. There's no increased risk of lung cancer associated with smoking cannabis, but cannabis does have products of combustion, tar and benzenes when it is heated. If you vaporize up to about 350 degrees, you will avoid those products of combustion that are carcinogenic. Some patients don't like to vaporize, but vaporizing a little flour
now and again,
a couple of times a week is not going to cause you an increased sputum production or cough or some of the problems we see with habitual smoking of cannabis.
I love this question. It's really actually a great one because, it emphasizes, as with so many things in life, it's about moderation.
Absolutely.
And, we don't have to be smoking bowl or joint after joint after joint in order to receive the positive benefits. Okay, so last question, and I really like this question as well. Thank you, audience, for the participation today. What are the effects when cannabis is taken with Cialis? And maybe you can tell everyone what Cialis is as well.
Cialis is a medication for men with erectile dysfunction. And there's no contraindication to using cannabis with Viagra or Cialis or any of those types of medications. They can be used safely and together.
Fantastic.
Yes.
I love good news. All right. So thank you everyone for watching. And this is our Ask a Doctor series. And we're going to have many, many upcoming episodes. This was our first one. I loved being with you here, Dr. Frye,
Thank you.
about sexual health. So tune in next time and thank you again.